Hello and welcome to the video. This is a quick look at a new product from ToolkitRC that's been released today. This is the ToolkitRC Multifunctional Charger called the M9. Now, if you've been in the hobby for a while, you'll probably end up like me, where you have lots of different bits of test equipment that are worth their weight in gold when you're either building or trying to troubleshoot a problem, or maybe repair a model that started to misbehave. This is the stuff that I use regularly here. The multimeter in the middle at the top is the most basic piece of equipment. I'd recommend everyone gets one of those. There's a handheld oscilloscope to its left, and underneath the oscilloscope is my Immersion RC RF power meter. The rest of all the stuff that I'm using here is actually made from ToolkitRC, and I'm a real fan of these smaller, not ridiculously expensive bits of test equipment that work really well. Now, one of the pieces that gets used probably almost as much as my multimeter is the ToolkitRC M8, the predecessor, well, not quite the predecessor, to this new M9. The M8 had the ability to do lots of things, to both generate and read signals, do power checking. It was a charger, and there was an M8S that came out that I had a look at, but the M8 has continued to be my go-to device to both generate signals to test systems, but also to plug things like a receiver in to see if it's actually bound and the S-bus signals coming out of it actually all make sense. So while I unbox this, let me talk about the specs. It has four basic modes that it does. The first is as a charger. It'll accept anything from 7 to 35 volts input via an XT60 connector. Maximum is 25 amps. Battery type it'll charge is LiPo, HV, LiPos, LiFe, lithium ion, nickel metal hydride, lead batteries, the usual stuff. Barron's current is 1000 milliamps or an amp, 4.2 volts. Charging power is a whopping 600 watts, which is a maximum of 20 amps. And it'll also charge pretty big batteries too, up to 8S. Discharge power, you can actually tell it whether or not it's connected to a battery or a power supply, and if it's connected to a battery, you can actually discharge the batteries in like a regen mode and have the energy put back into the battery that's actually running the thing. Also has a USB charger port on this as well now, 65 watts, 5 to 20 volts. There's two different connectors at the front. There's like a USB-A and a USB-C. So if you need a high power USB charger, that's also in here too. It's also a measurer, so it'll measure PWM, PPM, S-bus, as well as voltage, and it'll do the internal resistance of your batteries. Has a little card at the back which has both audio files and graphics card. I'll show what those do in a minute. And it'll also allow you to do ESC testing, which is 600 watts at 20 amps. It'll also generate output signals at PWM, PPM, S-bus, and it'll act as a power supply, and also has an overcurrent protection too. LCD on this is a 320 by 240 IPS screen, and it weighs about 235 grams, and it's about 108 by 71 by 36 millimeters.
Welcome to ToolkitRC.
So there are only two controls, a rotary control and kind of a cancel exit button. Short presses on them will do one thing, long presses will do something else. So let me zoom in so we can see the screen a little bit better. So with the zoomed in, if I long press the button at the top, it'll take us into all of the different functions that it has. Measure resistance, measure signals, signal output, ESC test, power, all the different pieces that you can do. So by going into this sub menu, you can then change how everything is going to work. And like the way it announces everything, I've turned it off on here, but there's things like the signal measurer is incredibly handy. The ports are covered by default when you take it out. You need to remove the little plug, and if you plug in your receiver in there, you can make sure that everything's working. Signal output is available in lots of different styles. We can use that as well to do things like play around with servos. So if you want to plug something in and kind of send to your servos, or just spoof a system and send a signal into a system to test something out, you can set it there. There's also the ESC power, which allows you to connect up an ESC directly to the output port. and then set your PWM values and test that. That's incredibly handy when you just want to make sure you've got it connected and it's going to rotate the right way. And then also have all of the power settings for the USB pieces too. So this is kind of like a Swiss Army knife of a device for the desk. And again, the M8 is something that I've had for many years, and it's just been a fantastic piece of kit that's been incredibly useful. And if you haven't got one of these kind of multifunction tools and you do a lot of building, I'd recommend getting your hands on one. So will this new M9 replace the M8s? Yes, it will. I like the fact it's a bigger, clearer screen that tilts. That's actually incredibly handy when you're on a messy desk, so you can see what's going on while it's at the back while you're doing all the setup. I like the access to the other functions. It's easy to figure out. Once you figure out that both of the buttons by long pressing will actually get you into other parts of the setup. The voice alerts are a nice touch if you're not wearing your glasses and it's kind of a bit further away. It's kind of easier to navigate. I do like the fact that everything is on a card at the back, so you can actually change your own welcome screen on there if you really want to, so that it shows whatever you want and actually potentially change the audio files as well. Controls and build seems well done and sturdy, and it's a decent balanced current too, one of the higher balanced currents that I've seen, which is an amp, which should help get those batteries balanced a little bit quicker. I do like the fact that it'll do everything that my beloved M8 does. So it's a charger discharger, so 1 to 8S, 600 watts stated, high power USB charger, resistance measurer, signal generator for S bus, PPM, PWM, act as a power supply, signal measurer as well, and also an ESC tester. I've held on to my Toolkit M8 for longer than I probably should do. The M8 is quite an old version now. It was superseded by the M8S, which I didn't like as much, but the M9 I think is a far superior version to the M8, so this is the one that I'm going to be using from now on. The only other two things that I'll draw your attention to is if you do a lot of playing around with servos, then the servo tester from ToolkitRC is very good and has a lot more features than the M9. And the other thing that I really like is the watt meter, which is really great if you want to do more ESC and load testing. But if you've not got a multifunction tool like this, then this is the one at the moment that I would recommend. This is the one that's going to be sat on my bench, and the M8 is probably going to go to a friend so they can have the kind of cool features that this thing has in a slightly older package. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organized into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.